one that we can no longer ignore. And newspapers, to my mind, are beginning a new life. They're not dying, they're not diminishing, they're beginning a new life. And that life is one where newspapers take their core creative and content resource and use it more effectively across other routes to market and in other services for the readers. And I think that newspaper industry has underplayed the strength of that content, underplayed the historic brand loyalty that exists among the readers, and also underplayed, most importantly, the fact that the journalists in newspapers represent hundreds of years of experience between them, thousands of years of experience between them, which cannot be replicated by start-up online businesses. So that resource is undervalued and underexploited, and only now are the inhabitants of newspapers, and particular journalists, beginning to realise the extent of the opportunity they have in this transforming world that will put new life into their industry. So the story starts here in Berlin. The story is one where we were able, in the last few months, to be able to say to our private equity friends or partners in Berliner Verlag, we could say to them, we now have made many acquisitions across Europe. We now have the resources to be able to make you an offer. And indeed, we completed the purchase of 100% of Berliner Verlag in April of this year. And the rationale behind that, of course, is that because Mecom Group plc wants to be in the Berlin newspapers, in German newspapers, in perpetuity, we see this business as one where you need long-term ownership and creative development to build and invigorate our industry. That vision, of course, is propelled in part by Berliner Zeitung, Berliner Kurier, Hamburger Morgenpost being part of a bigger entity throughout Europe, part of a family of newspapers, which now represents around 40 million unique readers per week and more than 200 newspaper titles, as I say, in 5 countries. That scale allows you to do a number of things. It allows you to migrate the best ideas from one title to another, from one country to another, and we're already seeing a lot of interchange between editors and managers across the continent. And that is not compelled by group management. That happens naturally. We had our first conference among all of the newspaper titles November last year here in Berlin, and 50 or 60 managers and editors attended that with an emphasis on the content side, and there have been numerous exchanges between the different titles. And sometimes the ideas work well in one country but not in another, but very often the same marketing techniques, the same online developments do take root in other countries when they're first discovered at the source. And I've got to say that we're beginning to see significant successes through organic growth of our online businesses, in particular because of those contacts. So we have scale. Scale is partly defensive, of course. We can move resource around between the titles that are in particularly competitive markets. But it is this new area of revenue building where we really want to exploit this scale. And as I say, the contacts between the different countries, the migration of ideas, have already led to fascinating developments. Again, newspapers have underestimated their standing in the community, and that applies just as much here in Berlin with Berliner Zeitung as it does to Berlingske Tidende in Denmark, or for the paper in Drammen in Norway, or for Czechoslovakia in Warsaw. All of these titles have got that valuable core asset of a loyal readership. And therefore we seek to develop new revenues in 2 ways. Of course, online, and we choose to do that organically, unlike some other businesses that choose to do it by acquisition. And the other key area of revenue growth is what we call the enterprises side, where we sell